and welcome to MENSCHlife. I'm David Grossman. I'm delighted to introduce you to Tony Comper and also Nicole Miller. They are here from an organization called FAST, which stands for Fighting Anti-Semitism Together. Very good title. And I'll also mention, for me, what a privilege it is to have Tony and Nicole here, but especially Tony. Tony is the immediate past president of the Bank of Montreal, past president and CEO, I believe, of the Bank of Montreal. And if you're not familiar with the Canadian banking system, because we have a lot of viewers in the U.S., there's 5 chartered banks here in Canada, and so Bank of Montreal has something like 11 million customers. So Tony's a very high-profile person from Bank of Montreal, and he and his wife Elizabeth founded this organization about 5 years ago called FAST, Fighting Anti-Semitism Together. So we're going to talk all about FAST today and what it's all about. And later on in the show, we have a special treat as well. We have Lenka Lichtenberg is here. She's a wonderfully talented musician. She writes very interesting music using Yiddish poetry and different sounds and influences from music all over the world, including Indian and Egyptian. She also does cantorial work too. So she's very talented, and she's going to bring, I think, her keyboard if we're lucky, a little bit later in the show. But first, I wanted to comment on some of the things going on in the world today. There's always crazy things going on, and I think it's important for people to have you know, some scope from an international point of view. Some of the things that are going on. We've talked about Lebanon in the past on the show, and that what's recently happened is that the Hezbollah is part of this government, even though they're accused of having assassinated the previous president, Rafik al-Hariri. His son, Sayyad al-Hariri, is the caretaker president, they call him. And the government seems to be falling apart now because the UN, it seems, is getting ready to indict Hezbollah for the assassination of Rafik al-Hariri. They have found evidence in the last number of months or so on this issue. And so that government's falling apart. Meanwhile, it's falling apart because Sayyad al-Hariri isn't going to, you know, try and stave off these charges. He's welcomed it. So it's yet to be seen what kind of reaction things will have in Lebanon politically and so on. Also, in the news in Pakistan, we've known that the government there is trying to fight off some of the extreme influences, and a security guard who was an extremist sympathizer killed a well-liked governor for the Liberal Party. Just, you know, it seems out in the open. He practically announced that he was intending on doing this. So extremist forces are really taking charge in countries like Pakistan and in other places. Joe Biden went out there to talk to some of the people. So hopefully he can find some of them, because some of the better people to talk to are afraid. They're in hiding. So it helps to put some perspective when we see all of the crazy things going on in the world, and we're, you know, very fortunate to be living here in Canada and you know, free countries like Canada, the United States, and others in the Western world. Tony and Elizabeth have created this program called FAST, Fighting Anti-Semitism Together, which is a program that is rolled out in high schools, I believe.
No, it's actually elementary schools.
Elementary schools. Okay.
Grades 6, 7, and 8 is the primary demographic, you know.
Okay. So we are going to take a very short break before we get into things with Tony and Nicole. So hang in. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we are back here on MENSCHlife with Tony Comper and Nicole Miller talking about FAST, Fighting Anti-Semitism Together. Tony, please share with me and with the viewers, how did it dawn on you? Why did you start this organization with your wife Elizabeth?
Very interesting. Let me just start, though, David, by saying thanks for having my colleague Nicole and I on your show to talk about FAST. We love every opportunity to talk about it because we think it's important. But it goes back to actually 2004, and there was an outbreak of anti-Semitic incidents in the city of Toronto. The usual terrible things, kicking over tombstones in Jewish graveyards, painting of swastikas on garage doors of Jewish homes. And my wife, Elizabeth, was watching television that night, and they were interviewing two young children who were obviously, I guess an appropriate word would be destabilized by this situation. And Liz said to me, you know what, we've got to do something about this because we Canadians fancy ourselves as being very tolerant, and yet how can this occur? We started talking to a number of our friends in the Jewish community about what could be done and what would be an effective approach. And we went through a gamut of, maybe using Crime Stoppers or something else of that nature. At any rate, after about 12 months or so, taking us to about 2005, concluded after much discussion that if anything was going to be effective, it had to be in the area of education. And that led to the development of the educational materials that we call the FAST program, which are materials that are targeted. They conform to all the curriculum requirements of all the school boards, all the provinces, French and English, things of that nature, and they're targeted towards kids in grades 6, 7, and 8. And it characterizes intolerance in general, but anti-Semitism is a specific manifestation of intolerance.
Right.
And helps educate the kids about what this is all about and what they can do about it. Now, to get this going, we assembled a coalition of about 30 non-Jewish business and community leaders. And I asked them to do three things. One, giving $10,000. Two, be prepared to lend their personal name and the name of their company to publicize and speak out against anti-Semitism.
Right.
That got the seed money from those founders and got us going. Fast forward, to date those educational materials, and Nicole Miller, my colleague, is the FAST National Program Manager, have been delivered to more than 870,000 young people across the country.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
And the demand coming from not just school boards, but also boards of education, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, which teaches young teachers, it has really taken off. And in fact, it's almost really tough for us to kind of keep up with the demand.
That's incredible. Now, we have a lot of viewers in the U.S. Who are probably watching this and saying, wow, that's something we need here. This program is specifically developed for Canada, I believe, right? Based on Canadian history.
No, it's not. In fact, if you go through the materials, you'll see that it's not Canada-specific. We talk about incidents, and of course, obviously, there's discussion about the Holocaust,
right.
But there's discussion about other people who were involved in genocides. A young woman from Rwanda,
right.
A black hockey player who wasn't allowed to play in the National Hockey League.
Right.
So it's not so Canadian specific that it couldn't be used elsewhere.
Right. Well, I mean, I was looking through the teacher's guide, okay, and I noticed that you're really covering a wide, even though the organization is called FAST, related to anti-Semitism, you're dealing with slavery issues, anti-Asian riot in 1907, discrimination against First Nations peoples, and all kinds of others. So I think that's very important too. But why did you lead with anti-Semitism? I mean, there's all different kinds of racism and discrimination. Why is anti-Semitism at the core of this?
A couple of reasons. One of which is, as I said, the seminal incident kind of puts paid to the argument that anti-Semitism is a thing of the past.
Right.
And we know from today where it's alive and well. In fact, even last weekend, there were vandalism against 5 synagogues in the city of Montreal.
Right.
So anti-Semitism is alive and well. It's the oldest form of hatred.
Yes.
And I believe that anti-Semitism is not a problem for Jews to solve. It's a problem for non-Jews to solve.
Right.
And that's kind of central to the core of what we're doing. The second reason, and probably more tactical, is that young children have difficulty dealing with kind of vague abstractions, and so they need specifics. And anti-Semitism being the oldest form of hatred,
Right.
is a very specific form of intolerance that helps us get them to see it and get them to get it, kind of a thing.
Right. What do you think of some of the arguments going on now in Canada? Some of our friends in the U.S. may have heard about it over this Human Rights Museum. It was originally Izzy Asper's idea, I believe, to put together this Human Rights Museum. And it seems to be having a very divisive effect, because now people are arguing and saying, you know, why is the Holocaust, you know, given a permanent exhibit and ours is maybe not given a permanent exhibit? And people seem to be arguing over whose genocide, whose situation is worse. What are your feelings on this museum and some of the response that we've had from different groups?
Well, you'll always, I think, have different opinions, particularly when you get into the area of human rights and things of that nature. But I think Gail and her colleagues who are developing the museum have been careful to kind of canvas and think about exactly how they're going to structure it, and I think it's up to them and their board to determine the best way to characterize it. But let's always remember, the Holocaust is unique. And that's not to say that other forms of genocide aren't terrible, et cetera, but I happen to believe that the Holocaust is unique, and therefore should have a central focus and an important one.
Yes, yeah. There is a lot of anti-Semitism now that's taking place in the form of, you know, vilification of Israel, and then, you know, it's a new clothing or cloak for anti-Semitism, but it seems to be getting some legitimacy. People are arguing about it in our academic institutions, and there's boycotts happening every day. Just the other day, people were complaining. Palestinian groups were complaining that the Bay is selling these Ahava products, Israeli products, and threatening to boycott, or trying to boycott them. Do you feel there's any legitimacy in this criticism against Israel? Is it just another form of anti-Semitism?
Well, here's the facts. The facts are that just being opposed to Israeli policies doesn't make you an anti-Semite. However, the conflict between Israel and Palestine kind of creates air cover for what I call the new anti-Semitism.
Right.
And so why is Israel being singled out, whether it be in the United Nations or whether it be anywhere else? Why are they the only nation that's singled out for alleged faults and things of that nature? Why not other nations that have got some pretty terrible human rights records and things of this nature? You know,
That's right.
So I'm very suspicious that a lot of this is in fact the new anti-Semitism. In fact, we were presenting just recently to a Canadian interparliamentary committee that has been set up to look into anti-Semitism, and this is members of Parliament, our Parliament in Ottawa, members from all of the parties. So it's
Right.
not government specific, focusing on anti-Semitism and what can be done about it. And this was a follow-on to an analogous interparliamentary committee that was set up in the UK several years ago, and became a model for examining this. So all to say that anti-Semitism is alive and well, to the degree that members of Parliament are in fact looking into it and what can be done about it.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Stephen Harper, our Prime Minister, gave an incredible speech at this
He did,
event.
yes.
And is an incredible supporter of the Jewish people and the State of Israel. I personally fear what will happen to Canada without Stephen Harper, and he can't remain in power forever. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, well, of course, to start with, Prime Minister Harper has to receive a huge amount of support and congratulations for the stance he's taken, the pro-Israel stance he's taken, and the support of the Jewish community. In fact, he's kind of stuck his neck out in certain cases, and rightly so. And so I think we have to be strongly supportive of the Canadian government policy. Prime Minister Harper is obviously leading the charge there, but let's hope that Canadian government policy will persist and will continue along that line.
Yeah. Now, Tony, I believe you and your wife Elizabeth have also been appointed, is that the correct word, for an Order of Canada?
That's correct, yeah.
You have the pin so far, which you're wearing.
Yeah.
But when do you believe when do you expect to receive the award?
It'll probably be sometime in the spring. They haven't announced the date yet, but sometime in the spring.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And that's for the work that you and Elizabeth have done with FAST.
In part, but it's broader than that. My wife Elizabeth and I have been involved in many philanthropic things. My wife, in fact, was leading the charge for an organization that was building a ethnically sensitive old age home for Chinese Canadians,
right.
Yihang, and that goes back 20-odd years. And so we've been involved in many charitable organizations. FAST, obviously, is a centerpiece of the things that we have been concentrating on in the last few years.
Okay, well, we certainly appreciate the work you've done on FAST and all these things. I was reading through the teacher's booklet, and I also have this lovely poster here, which I'm going to hang in my office. I think it's really great. Speak out against anti-Semitism, racism, bullying, all forms of discrimination. So you can see that there. So that's going in my office, and the website address, we put it up on the screen, but again, it's just FAST. No, it's Speak Your Voice, or what is the website?
The informal name for the program is called Choose Your Voice.
Choose Your Voice.
And that's kind of the theme of getting young people to speak out against all forms of intolerance. And
right. Okay.
The website, fightingantisemitism.com.
Fightingantisemitism.com. Okay, terrific. We're going to be back in just a moment, and I'd like to ask you, Tony, a little bit about some banking questions, if I could, because you've occupied the top role at one of Canada's 5 chartered banks, and I think Canada is doing some really unique things. So we'll chat about that for a moment when we come back. Hang in there. We'll be right back with Tony Comper and Nicole Miller.
DVD itself is would apply to any.
Okay. Okay, we're back. So we're just talking before we move on about the DVD. Can anybody get this, or do you have to be a Canadian school, or what? If people want to learn more about the program or look into it, what do they do? How do they get?
The DVD is specifically for students to watch, so
right.
Ideally it should end up in a school. It doesn't necessarily have to be in Canada. The teacher's guide is based on curriculum requirements that change, from province to province, so it meets the requirements in many subject areas. But a teacher could adapt it in the United States.
Okay.
It would be quite a bit of work. They work with curriculum experts to do so.
Right.
But we actually have someone who ordered in Israel who asked if they could take the materials, but they were able to show the DVD as is.
I should note too, David, that the one thing that we were quite pleased about was that last fall the FAST program was awarded the Canadian government's Race Relations Award for Community, which I think speaks to the fact that it's a broad program that impacts many areas of intolerance.
Right, right. That's excellent. So, if anyone wants to watch the DVD, can they order it? Can anyone order the DVD, or they can talk?
A teacher, if they were a teacher.
They have to be a teacher.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Very good. Okay. So, Tony, I'd like to ask you, if I could, because after the about the banking question, after the fallout in the U.S., we saw a worldwide economic recession, and during that, Canada has remained relatively stable. Real estate market has remained very stable, and people are saying that Canada has stood out as being one of the top countries in the world in terms of having stable banking system. What is different about our banking system here, Tony, as compared with the U.S.?
There's several things, and it's a very good question because we get frequently asked this question. Point number one is there are structural differences. So, for example, let me talk specifically to the mortgage market. In Canada, most of the mortgage lending and most of the mortgages wind up staying on the balance sheet of the banks, and so there's a direct connection between the borrower and the lender,
right.
As opposed to the U.S. market, where most of the mortgages are in fact sold into secondary markets,
okay.
And that kind of breaks the bond between the person who's borrowing the money to finance the
Right.
home, and that. So that's a specific example in the area of mortgages. But there are other examples. The Canadian banks are large. They're very diversified. They're national institutions, coast to coast. And in fact, many of us have fairly significant operations in the United States. The Bank of Montreal, in fact, acquired the Harris Bank in Chicago 25 years ago. And we've been building that and expanding it, most recently announced that. And that's because we have very strong capital positions. And I might also give a tip of the hat to the regulatory structure in Canada, which is somewhat different than it is in the United States. And so we benefit from structural advantages, we benefit from very strong capital ratios, we benefit from a very strong regulatory environment. But also fundamentally, Canadian banks tend to be very conservative.
Right.
And so you would not have anything like the extent of the subprime market developed here.
Right.
And Canadian borrowers are very conservative. And so even though there's talk these days about debt levels being high, Canadians in general are very conservative. And the amount of losses that we would take on our mortgage portfolios are really de minimis.
Right, yeah. Okay, so now the regulatory bodies are talking, because of the high debt load of people, they're talking about tightening mortgage rules. And they have done this before. It's not the first time. That they're talking about they're considering all these things, reducing the amortizations to 30 years and possibly increasing the minimum down payment from 5% to something higher. Do you think that's necessary? I mean, could we have a situation where our fear of overextending ourselves becomes self-fulfilling and then people stop buying and spending money?
No, I think it's a very good thing what the government has done recently. And in fact, the current CEO of our bank has kind of gone public and said this is a terrific thing. We don't want Canadians to get overextended, and I think it makes a lot of common sense to scale back the amortization period and to do other things. For example, taking away insurance on the home equity line of credit, for example.
Right.
And so these are conservative things, and I don't think that they're going to have a consequential impact on real estate sales and people buying homes and things of that nature. I think it's, in general, reflective of the general conservative approach that the regulatory authorities, the government authorities, are taking.
Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have more of the same good things that we've seen over the last years. From my perspective as a mortgage broker, I see how the real estate market has held so nicely. Even though things were a little slower in the fall, the prices have held their own, especially in Toronto and GTA and in other places. So I want to thank you both so much for being here to talk, to shed some light on us, on some important banking things, and of course this incredible project, FAST, fighting against Anti-Semitism Together. A terrific project, and congratulations to you and Elizabeth on the Order of Canada Award.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for inviting us on your program.
It was my pleasure to
Thank
both
you.
of you. We're going to be back in just a moment with Lenka Lichtenberg. We have a treat. I think she's bringing her piano. I don't know where we're going to put it. Hang in there. We'll be back in just a moment.
Wisely.
Hello, welcome to MENSCHlife. We are back, and I have Lenka Lichtenberg.
Yes.
Welcome. Delighted to have you.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We were introduced by Vera Held, who we
Yes.
had on the show a little while back. We were talking to her about her project with Albanian Jews.
Yes.
And-
Fascinating.
Yeah, and she referred me on to you, and I don't know why. I wasn't that familiar with your music and everything, but I've reviewed your website and all your stuff, and I love what you're doing. So
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you would come and join us today and bring your guitar. I told people you were going to be bringing a piano, but there's
This is just a little easier to carry around.
probably a lot easier to carry
Yeah,
around. I'm
for
not
sure.
sure where we'd put it. I guess you
Oh,
could
it
put
would
a
have been all
keyboard
right here, but this
somewhere.
is cozier.
It's guitar is always good for traveling and that kind of thing. So that's terrific. So we hope you're going to maybe entertain us a little bit at some point today.
Okay, I'll do something for you.
Okay, but let's talk a little bit about yourself and the kind of music. You were born in former Czechoslovakia.
Yes, in Prague.
In Prague, and you've always been into music, is that right? Like from a young age, or?
Right. I was in a theater called Semaphore, very known, one of the top theaters in the country for the last probably 50 years or so. And I was there, what you'd call a child star.
Right.
And that lasted for a few years. I
How old
recorded
were you
somewhere.
at that time?
I was from my age of 9 about.
So you really
and
were a
I was in the
child
theater.
star.
Oh yeah. And the starhood part of it lasted maybe 2 or 3 years. After that, I just stayed in the theater and sang with everyone else, no longer in the sort of
So
prominent
you were
position.
singing from a young
Oh
age?
yes. It was mainly about singing. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a great actress, but somehow I got away with it.
Now, did you study, you studied music, did you not? Or?
Yes, and then as a teenager I wanted to continue with the arts, and my mother told me that the only way she would agree with me actually dropping out of high school, I shouldn't say that, but I did. She said, well, it wasn't really dropping out, it was more like switching,
Right.
that she would allow me to do that if I really took whatever it is I was going to do very seriously and learn the most I could about it so that I could do it the best I can.
Okay.
And that's when I switched. I think I like that better. Switched schools from my regular high school, and I went into the Prague Music Conservatory to
Okay.
study voice and classical music, harmony, and all that. So I do have a classical background and training in that.
Okay, now, but did you study music here in?
Yes, and then when I came to Canada, I wanted to also pursue higher music education, and I went to the university first in British Columbia, in Vancouver at UBC, and then here I did my master's at York University studying ethnomusicology.
Okay, and would you recommend that? I mean, that was your mother's advice to you. And would you
Basically,
recommend
yeah.
that to a young musician, let's say, who was, 16 or 18, and they love music? Would you say, okay, do it, but go to school and study music?
Yes, I absolutely think so, because I don't think you can do anything at the best of your capability if you're not really well rooted, well educated on what it is that you're going to do. I mean, it's like in everything, you know. You
So
have
it's
to-
helped you. You're
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't really
post-secondary.
even know how much it was going to help me until I was actually making music for a living. And also, this classical background helped me in one of my jobs, actually the only job I had other than performing, which was teaching at Ryerson University as an academic, so you need background for that, obviously.
Teaching music, I
Yeah,
see.
yeah, I did
Yes.
classical music appreciation for 6 or 7 years.
I like music appreciation. I never got a
It
chance
was
to.
great.
Yeah.
And I wish I had several parallel lives, and I would still be there teaching, because it was one of the most wonderful things and most learning time for me to be actually the prof teaching those several hundred young people learn about music that they otherwise would not even consider listening to, and just open their eyes and ears, and it was wonderful.
Right, right. Well, I used to say that if I had a second life, I would have become a musician, but it wasn't for me for this life.
So you also need parallel lives, I guess, yeah.
You know, when I was 16, I used to play the guitar like non-stop,
Oh, yeah.
and but for various reasons, it was not to be. Maybe we'll jam on the show one day.
Okay, where's your instrument? How are you
I
gonna
don't
jam?
bring my. I don't bring, but you know, I should.
Well,
I should
you know
keep,
what, next time.
Yeah, next time, absolutely. So now, your latest, you've had 4 CDs. Oh,
Yes, I have several. There's several tracks in my activities. One of them is a solo musician, and even that takes several directions at once. Being a Gemini, I always go in several directions. I don't know which one is the most important.
is that what Geminis do? They go in several directions.
I think so. You're supposed to have sort of like a split personality a little bit,
Okay.
where one thing is pulling, the other one is pulling, and so you just kind of make
I
it with
feel
both.
like that sometimes.
You do?
I'm
Are
not,
you a
but I'm not
Gemini?
a Gemini. no.
Well, then you have no excuse.
Yeah, so
I
I don't know.
I do. I
It's
have
a
a great.
mistake. Yeah, okay.
So I'm going with my music as a Yiddish or Yiddish lover, Yiddishist, Yiddish performer, and now also a composer. So that's one of the tracks on which I am. The other one is Liturgy. That's actually the newest one for me, where I study liturgy, I compose liturgy.
Liturgy is prayer music, right?
Prayer music,
Okay.
yes, yes. And I started a project on that last year with recording as well. And finally, there are my various ensembles, and one of the most known, I guess, would be Sisters of Shainville, this wonderful, wonderful band. I can say wonderful band because the 5 other women in the band now are my best friends, and it's a female, all-female band where we do swing klezmer music. So that's Sisters of Shainville. So with them, we also recorded a CD called Shainville Express. So that's altogether different type of music. What I do with my own has also been a moral evolution, or a process of first learning the traditional, the folk music, the Yiddish music, Chava Alberstein, and so on, to build on. And then lately I've arrived to the conclusion that I think I'm now more interested in the future of where Yiddish music could go rather than the past. But of course the past has to be in there as well, otherwise it's standing on sand, on nothing. So in my new music, I still try to incorporate as much as it allows me to of the roots of the traditions. So something of that will be in there. However, the instrumentation of the music is looking globally. It's
Right.
spreading its wings and seeing Yiddish music as a world music rather
Right.
than just Jewish music.
Right, and so you've got, are all the lyrics in Yiddish?
The lyrics are in Yiddish because I find that that is the key, that is the chain, the golden chain, the golden kite that's going to keep it together still within the realm of the Yiddish culture is, of course, the words. So the words are written for my songs, for the most part, by Yiddish poets such as Simcha Simchovich, or there is this wonderful modern poet, her name is Beruria Wiegand, who lives in England. She's an Oxford professor and writes sweet, wonderful, fun Yiddish poems.
Okay.
A young woman.
But the music is all original?
And the music and the arrangements
Yes.
are mine.
Right.
Which I bring then to this band that I've put together over the last year, and which are amazing musicians. I'm just so lucky to be working with people of that caliber who are from all sorts of corners of the world. You will have a man trained in Indian classical music, or my colleague Alan Hetherington, who is his main interest and is Brazilian music. So you'll have that in there as well, and then you'll have the others. Everybody puts in there a little bit of something else, and the result, as I said, is very global sounding. But it is in Yiddish. You will also have some songs part English and part Yiddish. But the whole point of it is to advance new Yiddish culture.
Okay, we have to take a short break, and when we come back, maybe you'll play something for us. I bet our audience is dying to hear, as I am, a sample. So hang in, we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're back on MENSCHlife with Lenka Lichtenberg, and we've been talking about her career and her upbringing, and now we're here, we're in the studio, and I'm eager to hear you play something. Will you play something for us, Lenka?
Yes, I will. Now, I talked about new Yiddish culture, but there is a little problem with that because most of the new songs from my CD Fray are very much a collaboration of the voice with either the whole band, as I described, or played on the piano. Since I don't have that here, I will use a guitar, and I will not be able to play anything that's on the CD.
Okay, well,
but I will play
something
something else and give you an idea.
Okay.
Yes, I will give you an idea of what I do, where I take an old traditional Yemenite piece of liturgy, which is called Der Orgekra. And some people may know it from a Friday evening Shabbat service it's used. And I have put English text for it as well as Yiddish.
Great.
So it's a little bit of a different take on something that some people may recognize that they know the melody.
Excellent.
Yeah. Open my eyes so I can see. Open my eyes so I can see. Open my ears so I can hear. Hiding in your plain view, the truth I'll never know. I'll let my heart guide me to you. I'll let my heart guide me to you. Open my mouth and let me taste. Open my heart and let me feel. Who can mend your gefinnen? Who can mend nicht gefinnen? Who ich gehe? Who ich stehe? Open my eyes so I can see. Open my ears so I can hear. Open my mouth so I can taste. Open my heart so I can feel.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Very, very nice song.
Oh, this really sounds great with the band. You'll have to come and hear
I
us.
bet. I bet.
With two percussionists and oud, we use oud.
Yes.
And oh, that is fantastic.
Right. Now, you're doing some traveling and you have some tour dates coming up.
Yes, in fact, very soon. And we'll be playing this song with the band. We're going to Quebec, and our first night is in Quebec City, in a cafe where they have a lot of international music, world music such as ours. It's called Café Babylone, and that's on February 1st. And then on February 2nd, we're in Montreal, where I have never performed before. So this is a fantastic new experience in a really great large hall. It's called La Sala Rosa. And there we have a real fun program lined up with dancing, with all sorts of extra special guests and so on. It's going to be actually an 8-piece band there.
Right. And then are you going to the States or is it back to Europe?
Then in the spring, I am going back to Europe again.
Okay, right.
And In June, it's back to Montreal, actually, with Sisters of Shayneville. We're there, also with that band, performing in Cleveland at their Yiddish festival in June as well. And then in the summer, I'm going back to Europe, mostly Czech Republic, where I have a couple of festivals already booked. So it's all very exciting.
Okay, so you have a very busy schedule.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watching, we've put up the website, which is just Lenka Lichtenberg.
Yeah.
Yes. They can order the CD through the website.
Right. Yes. Yes. This one.
Right. So this is your latest CD. It's called Fray.
Yes.
Which Fray.
Yes.
Which means free. Is that
That's
Yiddish?
right. That's in Yiddish.
Okay.
Hi. And you can see it here also written in Yiddish. Yes.
Okay, very good. So they can order that. Okay, we have to take one more short break,
Sure.
and we'll see if we have enough time for one more song. I hope we can squeeze in one more if you'll be good enough. I'll be back in just a moment with Lenka Lichtenberg. Hang in there.
¿Por qué debes preocuparte de que los días descubren tan rápido? Tú también eres un enigma. El distante Dios no responde tus preguntas, así que lo mejor es cantar cánticos de vida y alabanza. Cada día, canciones de vida y alabanza.
Okay, welcome back to MENSCHlife. We have just about a minute left, and actually what we're going to do is we're going to play a video for you so you can get a taste of what it is with the whole band. And I'm sorry we only had Lenka play one song, but thanks so much for being here. You'll watch the video, and hopefully we'll have Lenka back here another time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Until next week, don't forget to be a mensch. I'm David Grossman. join us again. Thank you.